All right. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Exit Liquidity. Um, this is episode 92, I believe. I'm going to try and remember that moving forward. It's been 92 episodes and I still
I
don't
think it's
remember.
91.
Okay, maybe it's 91. All right, next week. Next week we'll get it. Today we have a guest who, another repeat guest, one who we have not had on in a long time. I think our second repeat guest ever at this point. We have Nate from a bunch of different cool big brain shit, but most recently adjacent. Nate, thanks for coming on again. Always a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, all pumped to be here.
We usually start off with like intro stuff and like the whole Exit Liquidity story and everything. Obviously, we already got that from you in the last episode, and I don't want to hammer on the same stuff too much. I think because you,
Ali's cutting out a lot, so I'm just gonna kind of do this intro. I do want to lay the foundation for kind of like from the last episode. The last episode, which was around a year ago that we did with Nate. Nate basically predicted or was kind of the guiding light for everything people kind of understand and know now about prediction markets. Perpetual markets, perpetual dexes, and like the proliferation of perp markets on chain. I think Nate's research on how those things work, from like the virtual AMMs to order books and everything, were like the best place for me to kind of understand, and I think for a lot of people, how those things work. And so that's kind of been so when Nate kind of started showing an interest in prediction markets, months before they started really growing on general CT in the CT world, kind of felt like he was going to tell the future again. So yeah, that's kind of what this episode is going to be. I think people don't have a full understanding of, the current landscape amongst prediction markets. They probably understand or have seen Polymarket from a high level, but there's many more markets in the crypto landscape, but also in just traditional online world. So yeah, super excited for this one. I think we should kick it off with kind of a general overview of you yourself, Nate, what you're building at Adjacent, and kind of what sparked this interest in prediction markets.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the great intro. I'm building Adjacent News at the moment, and it is very much so within the prediction market and forecasting platform space, but not an exchange. I think that it's pretty hard to find somebody building like a new product in that space, that aren't just like building some new prediction market exchange that's on like a brand new chain, and they just kind of copy these markets over, and that's kind of what they're running. I'm building like much more of a like consumer or like a news product that aggregates these markets. And we do so in 3 different verticals, which is news, data, and trading. So on the data front, that's the most straightforward. Aggregating markets, aggregating liquidity and trades across various platforms, and kind of showing them in a nice way. From that, we produce our own news content in an automated way. So this is like very simple. Basically, if there's a market, on something like the election or like Israel or whatever, and like within an hour, the odds maybe shift up from like, oh, it was a 25% chance that this was going to happen, but now it's a 50% chance that this is going to happen. There's probably some significant news around the reason that jumped up. And so we go out and scrape various news articles, put it together in an LLM summary, put out a few bullet points with the article next to it and the like subtitle of the market change. And this is just kind of like a nice way of consuming news as markets shift in their odds. Like most recently, probably the best example of this is a piece of news content that we put out that was FTX payouts will start within this month. And those odds had jumped from like 15% to like 70%. And so we reported on it. And then a few hours later, DB News reported that the FTX claims are actually going to start. And so you kind of have this like nice forward-looking news approach. We also provide what we're calling in-context news. So we have a Chrome extension as well as like an RSS reader where you can just install it. It's free. And as you're scrolling through Twitter or like you're scrolling on like New York Times or something like that, and you click on an article, we automatically embed prediction market odds on the article that you're reading across multiple platforms. This is like a really nice way to kind of like do a soft fact checking or provide additional context into what you're reading. And then we're also starting to build up like a trading platform that's cross exchanges. Right now, that's just a TradingView interface where you can kind of like chart Kalshi and Polymarket markets against each other, with more markets coming soon.
Yeah, that's awesome. And when it comes to the purpose, you've explained this to me before on kind of why a news platform versus another trading exchange, and just kind of the distribution that prediction markets at this current stage that they're in need. I think it'd be interesting to kind of explain that to the people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the easiest way to think about this, right, is like specifically for something like the election in Polymarket, right? Like, everyone's like non-crypto friends, or like my parents even, right? Like they're texting me and they're like, hey, look at these odds change on the presidential election. Like Trump is up this amount, or like Harris is up this amount, et cetera. And so there's this kind of like relevance where a much larger audience of people are interested in simply consuming the market odds and their change over time, alongside the news that they're reading, right? Like they're never going to trade it. They have no interest in trading it. Maybe they don't even know how to trade it, right? But there is a subset of those people that have never heard of the market before, didn't know you could trade it, actually have a really strong opinion on the market that they're reading. And I'm looking to build a distribution to get larger, much larger audience consuming these, and then convert that like super small percentage of people that didn't know you could trade on a specific market over into these exchanges, get them trading. The idea is that growing the distribution through a news platform should increase volume and users on these exchanges, especially in like the longer tail markets where these platforms aren't doing marketing for them, right? Like Polymarket's doing all this marketing for the election. Kalshi is doing all of this. They were just on in Times Square. They're doing all of this marketing for the election as well. But like, they're not doing marketing for like their hurricane markets, or there are other like longer tail markets that only have a few $1,000s of liquidity across them.
Yeah, I think that's super awesome. I think the distribution problem is probably one of the major problems, like you said, that could lead to more volumes. But, and just like in a perps market, in order to attract market makers and, better liquidity, market makers need to see a solid amount of retail activity to feel like they have some kind of edge or ability to make money. So I think this is pretty interesting in terms of comparing it to perpetual markets, and kind of the stage that prediction markets are at now versus what perpetual markets were at previously. Perpetual markets feel like they kind of grew from central entities that created some type of framework, and replicating that in an on-chain, quote unquote, decentralized way was the problem that other markets were looking to solve. What stage do you think, or how would you describe the stage that prediction markets are at currently, and in comparison to perpetual markets?
Yeah, so that's a pretty interesting question, right? Because I think that the stage that the prediction markets are in is skewed a little bit simply because of the election, and like the extreme relevance that Polymarket has gotten due to that, right? And everyone everyone that's like looking to launch a prediction market exchange on some other chain or with some other like feature, they're almost struggling to kind of catch up, in terms of like, we need to launch prior to the election. It needs to get out before the election, right? But I think like in terms of like all the infrastructure, all of the different types of like architecture that prediction markets have, they're like significantly behind in where like perp dexes have been, right? When I was on this on here like about a year and a half ago, whatever, perp dexes had already tried a lot of different solutions. There was pure order book based ones. There was pure AMM based ones. There were platforms like Perp V1 that like exclusively were VAM based, right? There were platforms like Drift V1 that was also VAM based and similar to Perp V1, blew up, right? And then you have people trying kind of combining these all in these hybrid order books, whether they are approaching it from the way that Drift has it, which is order book or like auction to order book to the AMM, or you kind of had it how like 0-1 had tried to do it, which was kind of the opposite. They would like seed orders along a curve. No one's really like experimenting very much with any of that. They are kind of just making a straight order book. A lot of the stuff is like off chain and kind of matched like that. A lot of the oracles are kind of the same. The resolution source is like, generally speaking, the exchange that is doing it. Sometimes you have stuff like Polymarket like resolving with like UMA, although that's also like a pretty like contentious topic. So I'm pretty excited about like all of these exchanges launching. As much as I say it's like, oh, it's kind of the same thing on these different chains, I hope that they experiment with different models across the board, and that their value prop isn't just like they have a market that some other platform doesn't have.
So when it comes to like I've kind of made the comparison, although it is different because it is like the election cycle and stuff. I kind of feel like in the early days of prediction markets, there were in perpetual markets, I wasn't there for like the BitMEX days, but like you could imagine that it was almost like a similar 4-year cycle that happened with like the crypto kind of boom and bust cycle. So when it comes to like the other infrastructure needed for prediction markets to proliferate, you mentioned like UMA and the Oracle infrastructure and like settling outcomes. What do you think attracts liquidity users, the whole nine, when it comes to prediction markets? Do you think it's going to be like beyond the election? Do you think it's going to be like unique games or unique markets, or do you think it's going to be like some kind of infrastructure unlock or like advancement in the technology or iteration on like different styles, similar to how like the iteration happened with virtual AMMs and perpetuals?
Yeah, potentially, there will be some kind of like interesting like infrastructure unlock. But like I do think that specifically in terms of crypto, the most important thing that crypto can provide to prediction markets is the unlock of user-generated real money, appropriately like resolved in disputed markets, right? So what I mean by that is like right now the leading like user-generated market is probably Manifold, completely like no crypto involved, no money involved at all. But they have like this like pretty strong like base of users that are like very interested in just like creating like small markets between groups of friends, creating like markets on like their KPIs, creating a market about a question that they might have, and kind of
Can
like
you explain
this.
Can you explain the history of Manifold? And like just, I sort of understand it, but it coming from the world of crypto, it sort of doesn't make sense that people are doing things without financial incentivization. Is it just like bragging rights? Are these points like? Could you explain the points that people are kind of
Yeah.
betting and accumulating?
So as just a real quick aside, because you brought up the history of Manifold. So 2 points on that. One, they were actually initially going to build on Solana, but then decided not to. Two,
Is there a reason?
yeah, probably for the second reason here, which is
Oh.
They are like extremely like EA aligned, and their like biggest their like largest investor was actually FTX, and which makes sense. Like it was kind of like Sam's like EA like thing, and so FTX like mostly funded Manifold, and like now they're like very separated, and all of that. But that is a interesting, I guess, like anecdote. In terms of like betting, and like and trading on things like Manifold, and there's other platforms too, like Metaculus. Yeah, it's like generally speaking fake money when we're talking about user generated markets. They call it mana. And yeah, I guess it's kind of bragging rights. But it's also like you have to understand that it's a very different user type that is trading on platforms like Manifold and Metaculus, right? Than people that are like doing more like betting on things like Polymarket or Kalshi. They are people that like really like knowing what's right. Generally speaking, like being right, and are just like much more like academic focused, researchy focused, and like okay with not like having some financial gain off of something. Maybe the information that they've got from that market is kind of like their gain, right? They don't need to necessarily have like any financial outcome from it.
So as a user, you're like more often than not interpreting information on a specific topic based on what the betting odds say, and then like providing your input rather than trying to financialize the information.
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit more collaborative and kind of like, yeah, a little more like information discovery. I mean, and to be fair, like Manifold now also does have a real money market that they enable through like the sweepstakes law. But that is not like the user generated side. So yeah, so like in terms of the user generated real money markets, right? That doesn't exist right now. There's not a place where like anybody can sign up, anybody can create a market, and then anybody can trade real money on these markets and then cash out real money, right? And I think part of it is like the Oracle/resolution dispute problem, right? Like you need to have like a really strong infrastructure set up in order to do that, right? Like for example, like on Manifold, the user generated markets are simply resolved by the person that created the market. And so like, yeah, there's plenty of manipulation and like falsely resolved things on the platform, but it doesn't really matter because it's not real money, right? And so like in order to enable a real money user generated market, you need to have like really strong like Oracle and resolution infrastructure. But that entire category of things is like exactly what I think crypto is good for in terms of the prediction market space, right? If you're just launching a prediction market platform in which like you are generally speaking doing the resolution yourself as like the exchange on some blockchain like Solana or whatever, like as a user, like outside of the fact that like you might be attracting different people because they are like much more crypto focused, if there's the same market for it, like I'm gonna probably just go as a US citizen, like I'm probably just gonna go straight in Kalshi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fully regulated, like I just move it in from my bank account. It's like pretty simple, pretty easy, right? Obviously like if I'm not a US citizen or like if I have some like most of my stuff's on chain, like maybe those are some reasons for that. But yeah.
So when you say use Kalshi, kind of give a high level overview of that side of the market. So like the, I guess, more financialized market. So just to wrap up kind of like the explanation of Manifold for people, no money, there's a certain area that has some kind of like money markets that's the outcomes are basically utilized by the or decided upon by the platform. And then there's markets that people just make themselves that are just not with real money and just with random tokens and are used for the information, bragging rights, and just general research. So where do they rank in terms of the volume or kind of activity for the markets with money? I think everyone knows at the current moment, Polymarket is kind of like number one for election markets. Where does Manifold get placed there? And then could you give a high level on Kalshi and what the differentiators are?
Yeah. So like in terms of like let's just talk like election markets. Right. I mean, Polymarket's far and above they're at maybe like 1.5 billion in volume or something like that. Or I think maybe last time I checked. Something like Kalshi, I think that they're approaching 10 million right now. But they've also only been live for like, I don't know, 10 days, maybe. Like they literally just got regulated.
But outside of the election, they were already like
for like other markets, like
other
economic Fed rate markets, like CPI and stuff. And I mean, the volume on those are like still like sub 1 million per market. Although that doesn't mean that like the markets themselves were like that inaccurate. Like I don't think that they've missed a Fed rate forecast in like a year or two, which is pretty impressive given like bigger bank analysts like have. And yeah, this like wisdom of crowds trading less than $1 million in volume on these markets, like have predicted it pretty accurately, which is cool. Manifold, on the other hand, like even their real money markets, I mean, we're talking like less than like $5,000 or $10,000 a market, like very, very small, right? But I think that one of the things that maybe is like hard to understand is the amount of money wagered on the market is like definitely a strong indicator in terms of like how accurate it is, but like not the only indicator, right? Like I think I was talking to someone the other day and I said like I would pretty much trust Metaculous's which is there's no money involved at all. Metaculous's forecasts on things like AI or like things related to like healthcare or like pandemics and stuff like that more than like any other market, even if they had a ton of money wagered on them, right? But in terms of like economic,
why
or
is
like
that?
more, so yeah, the reason that I would trust Metaculus like far more than other platforms that have maybe real money wagered on these events is simply because of their user base. So the amount of like users that are like actually forecasting on Metaculus are like far more interested in categories like healthcare and AI. And so like they're spending like insane amounts of time researching these, talking about them. You can read it all in the comments. And if you actually go and you look back at their track record, which like is generally like through what would be known as like a calibration score, like you can see that all of these users and just Metaculus as a platform are like very accurate on AI health related markets. There's actually a really good platform called calibration.city where they pull in Kalshi, Polymarket, Metaculus, and Manifold, and you can chart like the accuracy across the platforms per tag. So you could say like how accurate is Polymarket versus Kalshi at predicting a political event? How accurate is Metaculus versus Manifold at predicting like an AI event? And you can see all this. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm looking at Metaculus now, and the odds. It seems interesting. So, do you think the user base? Yeah, I think there's like a lot of differentiation in the user base that I kind of previously wasn't aware of, especially for the markets that are not as focused on financial incentive. Do you think there's I feel like the idea of winning financially is also like has like significant bragging right motivations embedded. They feel like symbiotic kind of incentives. do you agree? Do you think like there could be some type of like combination of the two that leads to like? Do you think it'll be like one dominant market, or do you think like all of these markets will continue to exist in like specific niches, and some will be better at certain markets than others?
Yeah, I actually do think that they will continue to exist in their niches. So like as a quick like overview for like the user types that like I think I generally see, like you have like the crypto, you have the crypto users and like maybe like people that are like sports betting. They like risking a lot to have like a potentially like really high upside. They're also like pretty like we're like debating these things all day on crypto Twitter, right? Like this is the user type of Polymarket. Plus, then you have maybe like 10 to 15% of people that are going to bet on markets like the election, that like the only spot they could go to bet in like significant size because predicted's capped, and they come over to Polymarket and they bet, right? But the majority of the users are like the crypto bro, like sports betting kind of type. For platforms like Kalshi, like they are much more like aligned with like traditional finance, like people, institutions, and platforms. Susquehanna's market making on Kalshi, which like is like pretty small relative to like the amount of volume that Kalshi does, but they're there and they are like integrating with larger financial institutions to like trade these markets. That's why like Kalshi is like definitely, I think, a lot better at predicting things that are like economic related. And then platforms like Metaculus and Manifold are like much more academic focused, researchy. These are like people that might like edit like a Wikipedia article, I think is maybe a good understanding. And like Kalshi and Manifold and Metaculus definitely fit more in the category of like I have some question, I want to pay somebody or like a set of people to give me like their best estimate and like tell me a bunch of information about this question so that I can have like the most accurate understanding of it. Where platforms like Kalshi and Polymarket are much more so like, I'm coming to the platform, I already have a view on what I think this market should be trading at, and so I'm going to trade at it.
Yeah. And when it comes to like the, I guess, push of, so your belief is that none of these markets will kind of converge into one platform, or will there be like a dominant platform that is right or is like accurate and right on 90% of application or markets? Or do you think it'll just still stay segmented?
Yeah, I mean, I think like Polymarket's like really good at like current events and like, yeah, like they're also like one of the few sources that are like listing things like relating to like war, like around like Israel, which is probably a benefit that they get because they are like, quote unquote, like decentralized and like part of this crypto ecosystem where like obviously like Kalshi is not going to list a war market. And so, yeah, I guess like, you said 90%, I'd maybe like bring it down to like 70, 75%. I think that they or a similar Polymarket platform will probably be like the general go-to source for information. But when you want to get into like maybe more like niche, or like very specific markets, like Kalshi's like Fed rate, like I'd probably go to Kalshi to look at that. And then if you want to like ask your own questions or like almost like when I open Metaculus, like I almost feel like I'm like opening up like a academic journal, like it's, if I want to go a little bit deeper into it rather than just kind of like blindly like look at the odds and just kind of like assume, given there's a lot of money bet on this market, that this is probably like a really strong like indicator of it, then I'd probably go to Metaculus.
Yeah,
I don't know. I think it's probably like worth it, like to like Manifold has their play money and their real money markets. But it is probably like worth it at some point to like have a platform that is like has these like actual markets that you can like bet and trade on, as well as they like cater to the forecasting community that doesn't really want to bet on things, but like, like allows them to kind of have this like more like natural like research and discussion about the odds of within the market, right?
So do you think it's like because there was some dispute online that I was reading on whether or not like money is the like attributing money to prediction markets and financialization to prediction markets is truly the best way to get an accurate representation of what people are feeling. There was conversation that some markets on Polymarket were being pushed with large amounts of money in a specific direction. Is it just like the kind of like researcher predicting the future accurately community versus like the financialize everything community? Is that just like those are they just like
Yeah.
at odds kind of?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I don't even know if it's necessarily they're like at odds, but like they don't really overlap. Even though the markets that they're like, predicting or forecasting like do overlap. Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of like an interesting dynamic.
And how large would you say like the non-financialization kind of prediction community is?
I think Manifold is at like a few thousand like daily active users, maybe like 2,000 daily active users or something like that. Maybe that was from a few months ago. I don't know if it like picked up with like election stuff. And I would have to say like Metaculus is like much smaller than that. But I think the other thing to realize, right, is that those that are using Manifold and Metaculus are like far more I don't know, they're like higher value users, or like they're like way more dedicated users. Like I think that a given user on Manifold or Metaculus is like far more likely to log into this platform every day and have like multiple hours of time spent on it than like your average Polymarket user that goes and places like a bet like one or two times,
Yeah, and that's versus like I guess you can lump in Kalshi with the like uber financialization of these prediction markets, like that universe.
Yep.
What's like the user size there?
I don't know. I don't think that they like publish their stuff where like Metaculus and Manifold do, but I wouldn't guess more than like a few thousand.
Yeah. And Polymarket is
I think like 10 or 15 maybe. I think that skews a little like, you could probably like cut that down like based on like people that have wagered more than like $100 or like wagered on more than like 10 markets or something like that, but
yeah.
Cool. The other thing,
that's a good, yep, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like the other thing too is like Polymarket does have like a lot of like USD incentives that they're handing out for like these markets, which is good for like user adoption. It'll probably transition to their token eventually, but like platforms like something like Kalshi, which is like regulated, like they're going to grow like much slower than Polymarket can, just given like they have all these crypto incentives that they can work with.
Yeah, and it's like speaks to the over financialization of everything, which I mean I do think is where, like personally, I think where things trend towards. In terms of kind of like speaking on Polymarket, Kalshi won the regulatory kind of stuff to be able to list these election markets. Kind of seems like the whole, allow one entity to be regulated and then go after the entity that has been unregulated and successful. Assuming that happens, assuming there's like, some kind of regulatory pushback for a protocol that has like billions of dollars in it, do you think, one, do you think that's going to happen? Two, in terms of kind of like the next evolution for a Polymarket or even Kalshi, like what do you kind of expect those things to look like post election and even like post. There's rumors on like a Polymarket TGE. Like it just feels like there's all of these major events between these two kind of markets happening over the next few months. What do you expect to happen beyond that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So I like, the like Kalshi winning that lawsuit was like massive. I think like even on like something like Manifold, I think they had like markets where you could like, use fake money to like bet on like, will Kalshi win this? And like those odds were trading so low, 20, 30% maybe, prior to them winning. And so like, it was also like quite a surprise, I think. And yeah, so I think in terms of the like, leading up these few weeks here until the election, right? Obviously, like Polymarket has like a far, they've had like quite the head start, as well as like quite the like attention grab in terms of like they are the go-to spot to look for the election odds. Even like non-crypto people like that I know are like checking Polymarket before they maybe go check some polls. There are plenty of there's been plenty of examples where like Polymarket is like leading the polls by like 3 to 6 days. So like the odds from 6 days ago on Polymarket are reflected in like today's polls. So like they are obviously like far ahead there.
But it's kind of like perps markets, right? Like TG happens, token gets announced, and then most of the time you see the volumes on the platform sort of disappear.
I
guess. Is that your expectation?
Yeah, generally. I mean, like there's like this nice like Dune query where like it kind of like shows like Polymarket's like volume based on like the election market and all of their other markets. Right now, like their election market, last I checked, is like taking up like 55% of all volume on the platform, which is a lot. But like even if you strip out their non-election market or their election market and you just look at non-election market volume, like their volume has like steadily been increasing like quite significantly, which is good. I think I don't know how fast they're going to launch this token, but like election volume will they're going to lose half their volume in a few weeks, right? And also probably like a decent amount of users that only want to like speculate on the election. I would say that like out of the users that are like basically just speculating on the election, whatever percentage of them are US citizens next election, they will probably be betting on Kalshi instead of on Polymarket, I would think. And yeah, I mean, like if Polymarket is like releasing this token like here towards the end of the year, early next year, I think that the first thing that they'll do with that token is like they have the USDC like rewards that they are paying out to these markets to attract liquidity, which I think is like a very expensive thing for them to do. I haven't done it check, but like I'd assume that they're paying a lot of USDC there, so it'll be nice for them to like replace that with their own token. But yeah, I mean, unless
that's a sustainable move though, like to just incentivize with the token only. I mean, I think it'll help boost, especially like non-election markets where activity is probably weaker and liquidity is probably weaker. But yeah, do you think that's a good move or?
Yeah, I mean, like if you like look at like, I mean, tons of perp platforms did that, and like when I think people like did like retrospectives on that, like it is like an extremely high cost of like user acquisition to just like hand out all of these tokens to attract them to the platform, right? But like I think it is probably like the way that they'll go. They've also like really like ramped up a focus on like sports betting. I think if anyone has like logged into the platform like recently, like you will probably kind of notice that like they're promoting like a lot of like sports betting markets and stuff, which I think like makes a lot of sense for them and their like user base. But like in terms of prediction markets, like kind of like I said earlier, like I think that like if they don't focus on maybe having something like a like user created real money market, that if you're a U.S. citizen and like Kalshi is like putting out these markets, I don't really see why you wouldn't trade on Kalshi instead. Like especially now that like they're paying like they're like passing through like 4 or 5% interest rate or whatever on these markets, which like is really nice to incentivize like long-term bets. And like they're putting out markets like pretty quickly as well. Yeah. I don't know. It's like a weird thing where it's like if you are like a pretty like serious trader across these markets, like you definitely want to have multiple platforms that you're like moving between, to where you can get like the specific market that you want, right? Like there's even times where it's like Kalshi will list a market, Polymarket will list a market, and maybe they're like on the same topic, but like just have slightly different wording or slightly different like resolution sources, like something. Let me think. Like for like even
is Kalshi doing resolutions themselves?
yeah, they resolve them themselves, but like they're federally regulated, and so like I think that federally regulated resolutions you probably should trust a little bit more than like you should trust of just like
Yeah.
some platform resolving them themselves. But yeah,
So what do
I
you
guess
think the like so what you're saying is that like Polymarket's, I guess, future is the ability to list more obscure markets, allow users to permissionlessly list any market. Do you think that's enough? Because like you said, the sports betting thing seems like, an area that they want to gravitate towards. Like when you're going up against sports betting platforms, I have some friends who are super into that. The biggest
Yeah.
kind of grab is the like functionality for like a parlay and all these different things, and to increase kind of the potential payout for these things and like attract the kind of like, I guess, the same type of person that is trading meme coins. If the goal is to get to a place where you're offering parlays, like you're going to gear towards more of like a centralized kind of positioning. Yeah, I've just been thinking about this a lot. I mean, I think like there will be like a convergence between prediction markets and just like GambleFi in general. Do you think like do you see that convergence happening? Do you think there'll be like one large kind of like, I don't know, I'm just
Yeah.
kind of like imagining a market, not a market maker, but like a very trusted entity living on the Polymarket platform itself and being like the go-to place to get like crazy sports betting odds, or for a specific thing. But in general, it lives on top of like Polymarket in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great framing, right? I think like, yeah, Polymarket, like as they like are focusing on sports betting, could look something similar to like I think like Shuffle, like I think that they also offer like election odds, right? But like
Yeah.
they are just offering just like straight presidential election, and that's like the only thing that they have, and then everything else is just like sports stuff on there. Where so like Polymarket's kind of approaching it maybe from like the opposite direction. But I think that the one nice thing about having a prediction market platform that is giving you odds on like sports is like it is just like pure market. Like there's no like house that's like involved with it, right? Which would be something that like Shuffle would have, or like a DraftKings or something like that would have. And so that should just like lead to better odds, I would think.
But do you think that like what I mean for better odds is like when you have a house that is like doing some crazy analytics to figure out like what the kind of like payouts they can offer on these bets are, like there has to be that loser on the other side. Do you imagine that like some functionality will be built into like a second version of Polymarket? Because like if you're like for these like betting things, or for more like the GambleFi sports betting predictions, I guess you could call them.
Yeah, I guess that's interesting. So you're just saying that like there's like potentially a play within these prediction market platforms to like really like house like a ton of like data and analytics about like user interactions and like almost like the order flow of like the users, like where they're betting and like where they're placing things and like using that
Yeah,
to
it's
like
like
drive
you
incentives in new markets.
yeah, because like the only way that you could offer like, you know, for instance, I had a friend who did like a 10 leg parlay on UFC.
Okay.
$100, crazy odds, payout was like 25K. Like
Yep.
there has to be money on the other side of these like 0 to 100 bets for the kind of like payout to exist. And so the house is kind of that entity that makes sure that there's money on the other side and that the house loses and the person wins and vice versa. Um, do you think something like that can exist on more decentralized type of like prediction markets, or is it always going to have to be like a central house entity?
Uh, yeah. I mean, I think it could probably exist there. Um, it's definitely like a lot more. And I think this is maybe like what we are kind of like talking about earlier, where it's like people should just be like experimenting with like tons of like different architectures and designs for these platforms, right? Like I don't think anyone's released like a way for me to like parlay conditional markets or like invest in conditional markets or parlay current markets, right? Like there are there's like conditional markets like on Poly Market where it's like if this thing happens, uh you know, will this happen? And you can like bet on that, which is like obviously like the outcome of the event can only happen if the first thing happens. Or like Poly Market has even like derivative kind of markets where they're like, what will the Poly Market odds be like this Friday kind of deal?
Yeah.
And so like those are like in a sense in the same vein, but like not exactly where like with a parlay, like you can just like pick a bunch of props and like, put them together. Although the books do like limit what you can parlay, right? It can also kind of like show up in the form of like offering like 5 or 10x leverage on a specific market, right? Like, okay, I can get 10x leverage like on the election market, so I'm gonna go do that, and then I'm gonna like use the rest of my money to add on like a few other things. Um,
Yeah, that was the kind of thing that made, I guess, like you could say offshore or decentralized perpetual markets very attractive. Like traditional finance wouldn't allow you to get 20, 50x leverage on
mhm.
assets. Do you think that's probably an opportunity? Because I don't like if leverage started getting baked into these uh, markets, these prediction markets, I'm assuming that Kalshi probably wouldn't be allowed to offer that or would be limited in how they offer that.
Yeah, I think
You
if they
think
were,
that's like a different type of moat?
yeah, probably. Like I think, yeah, culture would probably have like pretty limited like margin. I think. Yeah, that could be a moat for sure. That's definitely an approach. But like the crazy like thing is like there's like all of these reports about like sports betting over the last like few months and stuff, and like one of the stats, just because we've been talking about parlays, is like 90% of like all bets are parlays, which is
Yeah.
like absolutely insane, right? And obviously that's like very much so. Uh, like based on the user base that are making these bets, right? I think like there was something where it's like if you scale that out, like based on like the amount of money that's like being put on the bet, like as you go up from like $5, $10, $100, and then you're getting into like 10K, 20K bets, like the percentage of parlays obviously drops a ton. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think it'd be sick if like Polymarket introduced some type of parlay interface, even if it's not like exactly what like a sports book might have as a parlay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that like overall betting on things makes anything more interesting. Like people betting on what Trump was going to say at a specific speech. I think there was like a couple million in some of these markets at one point. Um, uh, and I think you can kind of like apply that down to almost anything. And just the way gambling in general is like kind of grabbing on to just like everyone in this in the United States at least, and just like around the world. Parlays feel like the meme coins of like prediction markets or betting, and it's like they can offer crazy returns. Most of the time people are going to lose, and like LPs or kind of like, you know, quote unquote smart money would love to trade against that. And I think it would provide like a good incentive for more market makers to kind of jump into more prediction market based things, if they can feel like they have an edge over like a less sophisticated retail audience. In terms of the resolution, could you kind of describe the current UMA setup? There's been a lot of talk of incorporating AI into some of these resolutions. What does the resolution side look like? What do you imagine it looks like in the future?
Yeah, so from understanding on like the Polymarket UMA side is like they will like resolve a market, and then there's like some period of time where it can be disputed, of which it goes over to the UMA platform, and like UMA stakers can like approve or disapprove and kind of dispute the actual resolution, right? Which is like a pretty decent setup, I think. I think it kind of sometimes gets like a good amount of hate for like the fact that like UMA token holders or stakers are like very concentrated in the hands of like a few people, and that like even on some of these like even on some of these examples of disputes, like there's only maybe like $20,000 on the line, but it's like a multi-million-dollar market, you know? And so like it's maybe like has some flaws like from that perspective, but I think the general idea of resolving something and then there being a period of time where people can say like, well, no, that's not exactly what we're thinking, and then kind of passing it off to some counsel again with money on the line, being able to do it is like a pretty solid way of doing it.
Do you think there's any substance in having like AVSs participate in this? Because that's what they were described as to do, to be able to do. Sure.
Yeah. So like, and I do think that there could be like a pretty solid unlock for some platform to like have the same like setup that like UMA offers, but like offer like additional tokens that can be used to do that, right? Which, you know, could be hooked up with an AVS. Like I think that would be pretty cool.
Additional token element.
Well, yeah, just like okay, I should be able to like vote on an UMA dispute with my like staked ETH, and instead of like me specifically needing to go and like buy UMA, stake the UMA, and then vote with that, you know?
Yeah.
Like I think that would help in terms of like having like a higher amount of money within like the dispute, like within the people that are like resolving the dispute versus the market. Because like I said before, like the big problem is like you have $20,000 resolving a multi-million-dollar market, right?
Yeah. When it comes to the because those are oracles in general, basically, do you think that there has to be an element? Like, do you think there has to be a dispute period in these resolutions? Or do you think that there can be a level of insurance kind of provided for like the wrong decision being made by the resolution process? So for instance, like if you're using Polymarket, one of the things you'll notice is that like it takes like $750 to dispute some type of resolution. And so like there were some markets, I think Ali and I were messing with around, or Ali and I weren't messing around with, our friends were messing around with. If they disputed this Venezuelan election and, you know, they changed what the text was for the resolution process, like the decision, the payout gets delayed. So it creates like a terrible user experience. And then people feel inevitably wronged because, you know, the sources, etc. This is the same thing in oracles across like other things like lending and perpetuals. There could be wrongful liquidations, and then the oracle kind of like walks away almost scot-free in terms of, you know, aside from reputation. Do you think there's like a potential for, you know, prioritizing a user experience, focusing on speed and like an accurate or as close as possible to an accurate resolution, and then having like some type of insurance market on the back end?
Yeah, that's interesting. So like on the first point, I think you had mentioned like AI like a little bit back, and I think that the biggest area that like AI can help is like simply in just like writing the resolution criteria, right? And like being like hyper specific, right? I think, you know, often like on Polymarket, like you just have some intern or whatever like writing this criteria, and it's like generally good, and like most of the time it's fine, but like for some like really highly traded markets that like aren't as like specifically worded, maybe there's some argument in how to like properly resolve it, and it's also, it seems like an LLM could like really like have it like extremely specified, to the point where like you can't really argue about the actual like resolution criteria, and so that seems like pretty helpful. The insurance side is like kind of interesting. Like I almost want like I almost want a
There's like
Polymarket
SLAs
market.
in like traditional in the
Yeah,
traditional space, right?
yeah. I was just gonna say like I want like a Polymarket market on will a poly like how many Polymarket markets in the next few months will be like accurately disputed, you know?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know how you would like do something like an SLA, like I like on the markets, like Polymarket will resolve uh, markets without a dispute 99% of the time, kind of thing, is what you're thinking.
Yeah, and the SLA would kind of be like, if there is a provably wrongful outcome, the entity that determined the outcome is kind of liable for, you know, paying out people that were um, wrongfully, I guess the outcome didn't go in their favor and it ended up being incorrect. So you're prioritizing like the outcome being pushed and people being paid out quickly, instead of sitting and waiting for $750 disputes to keep going over and over again. You kind of just push a decision, and the entity that pushes that decision is kind of liable for a potentially wrongful decision. They could probably bake in like AI mechanisms or, you know, different things to kind of aggregate and source how they're determining the outcome. But in general, they'd be incentivized to find, or they'd be incentivized to be as quick and accurate as they possibly can, through some type of like SLA or some kind of like ABS. Yeah, it's just something I've kind of like thought about, to allow this like, you know, permissionless outcome resolution stuff to exist.
Yeah, I mean, something that would be interesting too is like, okay, I make $1,000 trade on a market, um, and maybe I pay like 10 bips in fees, but like, and like those fees are like specifically going to like the resolution council or whatever, right? In order to like financially, like the bigger the market has, and the bigger the market is, the more money that's on the line, the more that they're going to get paid to like resolve this thing quickly and accurately, right? Um, yeah, I mean, like for example, like in the Polymarket case, like maybe I paid 10 bips to UMA stakers, right? Like that could be kind of interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's going to be some. Like, it feels like there has to be some progression in this kind of infrastructure for like the ideal world to exist. I guess since our last episode kind of felt like it, spurred the whole growth of the perpetual space. Do you want to make some predictions for the prediction market space? Let's just say over like 12 months. Could be fun.
Yeah, sure. So I think, let's see, I'll give you a few. I think that Polymarket releasing their token will be like kind of their top, like in terms of being like maybe like the most like significantly growing platform. I think they'll still have like a lot of assets and still have like a lot of people trading and stuff on it. But I think that probably like invites additional regulatory action, especially now that Kalshi is regulated. I think that launching the token and having the increased focus on the sports side is pushing them towards more of like a traditional like casino sports book model, like a la Shuffle. So that's probably one. So I think that there's like a huge area for a prediction, like a crypto-based prediction market, to kind of take a lot of that share, and perform really well, like innovate a lot, and please launch user-generated cash markets. That would be fantastic. I think also over the next year, or at least I hope, that all of the people that are continually looking at the election market for like over the polls kind of like see these other longer tail markets and use those odds as like additional information for kind of the news and stuff that they're consuming. I think that would benefit people a lot to kind of have this like additional context, right? It's almost like prior to like these prediction markets, right? Like everybody was always looking at polls for like anything political based, but like you never really have polls on like real life events. But now you kind of do. And so I think that interest and kind of just like attention to like reading the odds, but not necessarily like interacting with them, will grow significantly. Prior, it's kind of just been like stuck in this like forecasting ecosystem that's like academic aligned. And third, let's see. I think
So Polymarket just closed, according to this Dune dashboard, around $1 billion in volume for this month.
Insane.
Yeah,
Absolutely insane.
Do you want to kind of bet on the volume this time next year?
A year out, yeah. Let's go. So strip out the election
Over,
market.
under.
Yeah. So strip out the election market. You have 500 for like that was $1 billion for like the last 30 days, or just half the month of October.
I guess. Oh, this is from the first. So this is 14 days, 15 days.
Okay, and obviously that's going to like increase like as we get closer to election. I don't know. So what? Just double that. Say there's like 2 billion a month or something like that.
Yeah.
Half of that's the election market. I'm gonna say
747 million of it was the presidential election winner. It's pretty nuts. That's almost 3/4 of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna say that the line is like 750 million. And
Yeah.
I'm taking the over.
Taking the over? Cool.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. What are some other like class questions? Now this is just gonna be like me selfishly trying to like get some like information. We talked about resolutions. We talked about kind of where that's headed. Do you think it's just gonna be like one giant super app with like casino, sports book, prediction markets? Like we've seen perpetual like perp markets kind of adopt elections. Do you think it just trends to a giant super app, or do you think there is going to be like this go-to prediction markets platform? Because just the relationship between perps, gamble, like just GambleFi in general, you can even lump options in there with like 0 to date expiry stuff. Like it just feels like they'd all should be in one place. Do you think that's where things trend, or do you think there's still going to be that core separation?
Yeah, I mean, like the example, right, is that like all the perp markets now are also like lending and borrowing markets, and like often the best place to like lend and borrow is like a perp market, because they kind of have like all this additional, um, interest on the perp side. Let's see. I do very strongly think that sports books and prediction markets will be like one spot to go, and it'll generally be known as like event contracts, betting on
Yeah.
like discrete events, whether it's sports or politics. Um, I think I think that's like a very easy thing to like be joined within crypto. I think it's like significantly harder to do outside of crypto in like um, like following the regulation. Mostly like because like Kalshi is like regulated by the CFTC, but like sports books are like regulated by like their respective states, like gambling authorities, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's kind of like a interesting angle. But I guess another prediction is like, and I think I tweeted this out like a little bit ago, is I do think that a sports book will acquire a prediction market platform. Whether that is like someone like DraftKings, doing that, or that is like some crypto platform, like, acquiring another crypto platform that has like a bunch of users. There's just like too much overlap, I think, with betting on prediction markets and betting on sports in terms of like the user type. And so I think that's like probably a pretty safe prediction that that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's also just like specifically to Manifold. Do you expect this kind of like application to change? I mean, do they make money at the moment? I'm assuming they do on some of the like cash prize stuff. But do you think like crypto platforms could kind of just like swallow the academic, just do it for the love of the game type of people, or do you think those people will just forever live in their own world?
Yeah. I think they could potentially do something with like something like Manifold, where I don't think they'll ever touch Metaculus per se. But like where like the Manifold people like are like users, like, they are consistently betting, but it's just not actually like real money. Where like on something like Metaculus, like you don't really like bet, like you just kind of like forecast. Like I think that this thing is going to be at 70% odds, so you just put it at 70% odds. But like there's not really like a concept of like I have like a bankroll of like 100,000 fake tokens that I'm gonna bet on.
Yeah.
So yeah, potentially there could be some like edge like on the more like Manifold side. I think that the two of the most interesting things that Manifold has tried, and I keep saying here like that these like new prediction market platforms and projects should like try to like innovate a ton and like try out like different architectures and designs and stuff. They're not involved with crypto, but like Manifold is like consistently trying new things. They publish it all like in an open like Notion doc. Actually, like they're also, just an interesting tidbit, their markets are actually like initially seeded with liquidity along a concentrated AMM, like exactly like Uniswap v3 design, and it actually used to be Uniswap v2 design, but just with all their play money. But like Manifold's experimented with like loans, so like they would like give you back a portion of your money that's in open positions every day in the form of a loan with an interest rate attached to it, which was kind of cool. They've also experimented with like the concept of like payment for information. So like you could like ask a question, but like in order to ask that question, you would have to like put up a certain amount of your like mana, your fake tokens just to like put into the market, not even necessarily you taking a position on it. It's like if you want to have like a high quality user generated question, you have to pay for that information. And they actually saw like a pretty like large growth, I think, in like people doing that. Where like you might expect like when people have to start paying for something, it would kind of drop off. But because like their user type is really just people that have a question about something and they want to get like crowdsourced, information about what they're asking, rather than they have like a really good view on something, and they want to bet on it.
Do they have public APIs?
Manifold, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, because it seems more and more that they're just like like you said, just like a good user generated data source, basically. And that
yeah,
data
for
might
sure.
be more valuable than just like trying to get users to bet with real money in their eyes. Yeah, that's cool. And then in terms of like specifically in the crypto space, just to wrap, I won't take too much more of your time. Any dApps, any like newer applications that you kind of looked into that have been trying things interesting, specific to the crypto world on the prediction market side?
Interesting. I think, I think I would probably talked about these guys a lot in the last episode, but like Drift has been doing some pretty cool things on the prediction market side. I think that they are the first and maybe only platform that there's like multiple collateral assets that you can use for your position, right? Which is just kind of like inherent to like the exchange that they have. But you can like margin your positions with like Sol or like staked Sol, or they just like launched their like liquid staking token too. Like I'm sure you could use that like to margin your election bets, which is cool. So specifically within prediction markets, I think that is probably like the most like interesting kind of platform. Everyone else is seemingly just kind of building very similar things. There's another platform. I am going to butcher the name. It's like Prague YZE or something like that. They just came out. I tweeted about them a little bit back, I think. And they are offering leverage on prediction markets. They're in testnet right now. That's like super cool as well. I'm excited for them to come into mainnet. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think that just about does it. I mean, and then in terms of like adjacent, we talked about it in the beginning. Kind of what can people start to do?
So we are in like open beta. So you can go to adj.news. You can subscribe to our our own produced content. We also tweet it out at Adjacent News. You can use like our API, our data platform, our trading platform. We have like an RSS reader. Just go to the Chrome Web Store, look up Adjacent. We're the first result, and you can start reading prediction market odds in line on Twitter, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And we'll see ya.
Yeah. See you guys.